The day Brightwell Enterprises collapsed began with a simple misunderstanding. Xavier Cole, billionaire CEO of the industry's leading cybersecurity firm, walked into their lobby dressed in understated luxury, without fanfare or entourage. Receptionist Ashley Monroe took one look at his black skin and designer casual wear before dismissing him as someone who didn't belong. "Deliveries in the back," she smirked, as security guards gripped his arms. Mark Reynolds, executive vice president, recognized Xavier immediately but said nothing, allowing the humiliation to unfold. As Xavier was escorted out, his expression remained unreadable, betraying none of the calculated response already forming in his mind. By afternoon, Brightwell's stock would begin its freefall. By month's end, the company would cease to exist. Xavier Cole didn't believe in revenge, he believed in consequences. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Morning light spilled through the towering glass facade of Brightwell Enterprises, casting long shadows across the pristine marble lobby. Xavier Cole adjusted the sleeve of his charcoal cashmere sweater as he stood across the street, studying the building that housed one of the most promising cybersecurity startups in the country. The 38-story structure gleamed like a monument to wealth and innovation, its sleek architecture a testament to Brightwell's meteoric rise in the tech industry. Xavier wasn't one for dramatic entrances. Despite being the founder and CEO of Cole Innovations, a tech empire worth billions that specialized in cutting-edge cybersecurity software, AI integration, and financial security platforms, he preferred to conduct his preliminary assessments without fanfare. This wasn't vanity. It was strategy. "Are you sure about going in alone?" Jacob, his chief of security, had asked that morning. "I can have a team ready in 20 minutes. Xavier had merely smiled. The best way to understand a company's culture is to see how they treat people when they don't know they're being watched. Now, standing outside Brightwell's headquarters, Xavier adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, a subtle display of wealth that most wouldn't recognize unless they knew what to look for. His attire was intentionally understated. The cashmere sweater, tailored slacks, and handcrafted Italian leather shoes spoke of quiet affluence rather than ostentatious wealth. No cufflinks flashing with diamonds, no designer logos screaming for attention. Just clean lines and perfect fit, the hallmarks of true luxury. A crowd of employees streamed through the revolving doors, their movements hurried by the Monday morning rush. Xavier observed a pattern forming. A tall white man in a navy suit approached the entrance, and heads turned. Smiles brightened. Security nodded deferentially, and the receptionist visibly straightened her posture. The man wasn't wearing a badge, clearly not an employee, yet he was treated with immediate respect. Interesting, Xavier thought. He crossed the street with purposeful strides, joining the flow of people entering the building. The immediate change in atmosphere was palpable. Where others had received welcoming nods, Xavier felt side glances. A security guard's gaze lingered a beat too long. A young executive clutched her purse tighter as he walked past. The lobby itself was a showcase of modern corporate design, all white marble, polished steel, and abstract art pieces that probably cost more than what most employees made in a year. A security desk flanked the left side, while the reception area dominated the center of the space. Behind it sat a young woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ashley Monroe was in her element. As Brightwell's front desk gatekeeper, she wielded surprising power for someone so junior in the corporate hierarchy. She determined who got through and who got the runaround. As Xavier approached, she was scrolling through her phone, ignoring a young intern who stood awkwardly at her desk. "Excuse me," the intern said timidly. "Can you tell me where the Miller conference is being held?" Ashley rolled her eyes dramatically, not bothering to look up from her phone. "Check the directory," she said, waving vaguely toward an electronic board on the far wall. "I'm not Google Maps." The intern scurried away, face flushed with embarrassment. Ashley smirked, returning to her social media feed. The small display of power seemed to energize her, and she straightened her designer blazer, with a self-satisfied adjustment. Xavier approached the desk, noting everything. The nameplate reading Ashley Monroe, Guest Relations Coordinator. The framed Employee Recognition Award from 6 months ago. The subtle but unmistakable Tiffany bracelet on her wrist. The way her eyes flickered up to assess him, then immediately backed down in dismissal. "Good morning," Xavier said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who commanded boardrooms. "I have a meeting with Richard Lawson at 9. Ashley didn't even look up from her phone. Her lacquered nails continued to tap across the screen as she responded with practiced disinterest. "Name?" "Xavier Cole." This time she did glance up, her gaze performing a quick assessment. Her expression shifted from professional disinterest to something more disdainful. "Yeah, sure you are," she said with a scoff. "Delivery entrance is around back through the service alley." She returned to her phone, conversation clearly over in her mind. Xavier remained still, his expression unchanged despite the dismissal. He'd encountered this before, the assumption that he couldn't possibly be who he claimed to be. Not with his skin color. Not in this building. "I'm not delivering anything," he clarified, his tone remaining even. "If you check the executive calendar, you'll find I have a 9 o'clock meeting with Richard regarding the potential partnership between Brightwell and Cole Innovations." Ashley sighed with exaggerated patience. She set her phone down and made a show of typing something into her computer, though Xavier noted her fingers weren't actually pressing the keys that would access the calendar system. "Nope," she said, popping the P with unprofessional flair. "Nothing under Cole or Xavier. No meetings with Richard until 10. She leaned forward, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but Mr. Lawson doesn't take unscheduled meetings, especially not with people who—" She paused, eyes sliding over his attire before continuing. "Might be wasting his time. So maybe you should leave." The tightening around Xavier's eyes was the only indication that her words had registered. He reached into his pocket for his phone, intending to call Richard directly, when Ashley's hand shot out, grabbing his forearm with surprising force. "Sir?" she said, voice suddenly louder, clearly intended to draw attention. "I've already told you there's no meeting. You need to leave." Her grip tightened on his arm as she stood, attempting to physically guide him toward the exit. The movement caught the attention of nearby employees. Conversations paused as heads turned toward the commotion. Xavier remained perfectly still, neither pulling away nor escalating the situation. His gaze dropped to where her hand clutched his sleeve, then lifted to meet her eyes directly. "Take your hand off me," he said quietly. The words carried no threat, but there was something in his tone, a depth of authority, that made Ashley's fingers loosen reflexively. She recovered quickly, face flushing with embarrassment at being momentarily cowed. Dropping her hand, she raised her voice further. "Security, we have a situation." Employees in the lobby had stopped pretending not to watch. Some smirked. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. A young woman on the mezzanine level above paused at the railing, her expression troubled as she observed the scene unfolding below. "Is there a problem?" A deep voice cut through the tension. 2 security guards approached, both large men with stern expressions and hands resting near their tasers. "This gentleman," Ashley emphasized the word mockingly, "is refusing to leave, after being informed he has no appointment." The security guards flanked Xavier, their positioning strategic. One slightly behind, the other directly in front, creating a barrier between him and the reception desk. "Sir," the lead guard said firmly, "I need you to step outside." Xavier's expression remained impassive. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I have a scheduled meeting with Richard Lawson to discuss the potential acquisition of—" "Sir," the guard interrupted, hand now gripping Xavier's upper arm. "We can continue this conversation outside." The second guard moved closer, creating a wall of intimidation. "Step outside before we have to escort you out." Throughout the lobby, the audience had grown. Employees lingered by the elevators, coffee cups suspended midway to lips as they watched the drama unfold. Ashley stood behind her desk, arms crossed over her chest, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "These guys never know their place," she whispered to a nearby coworker, just loud enough for Xavier to hear. The grip on Xavier's arm tightened painfully as the guard began steering him toward the exit. Xavier remained composed, though something dangerous flickered across his eyes, a momentary reveal of the ruthlessness that had built his empire. He didn't resist physically. There was no need. Time would deliver his response. The elevator doors opened, and a white man in his 50s stepped out. His bespoke suit and commanding presence immediately identified him as someone of importance. Conversations hushed further as he took in the scene, eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Xavier. "Is there an issue here?" the man asked, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Ashley's demeanor shifted instantly, her posture straightening as she addressed him with forced brightness. "No problem at all, Mr. Reynolds. Just someone trying to talk his way into a meeting that doesn't exist." Mark Reynolds, Executive Vice President of Operations at Brightwell, studied Xavier with cool appraisal. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, brief but unmistakable. He knew exactly who Xavier Cole was. Yet instead of intervening, he simply nodded toward the security guards. "Well, I'm sure our team has it under control," he said dismissively. As he turned away, he added under his breath, "Security should handle these types right away." Ashley giggled, clearly pleased with the approval. "Another one trying to beg for a job or something," she said, loud enough for Xavier to hear. Mark chuckled in response, a sound bereft of genuine humor. "Some people just don't know how things work in places like this." He cast one last look at Xavier, an assessing gaze that revealed he absolutely recognized him, before strolling toward another set of elevators, leaving the situation to unfold. Without his intervention, Xavier locked eyes with Mark briefly. It was a silent exchange that lasted only seconds, but in it was a promise, cold, calculated, and absolute. Mark was the first to look away, his stride faltering slightly before he disappeared into the executive elevator. The security guard's grip hadn't loosened. "Last chance to walk out on your own," he warned, tugging Xavier toward the revolving doors. Ashley took advantage of the moment to approach, leaning in close to whisper in Xavier's ear. "Maybe next time, dress the part. This isn't a welfare office." Words hung in the air between them, sharp and deliberate. Xavier's expression remained unreadable, his focus seemingly elsewhere, perhaps already calculating the moves that would follow this moment. As security pushed him toward the exit, Xavier noticed the young woman still watching from the mezzanine. Above. Unlike the others, her expression held no amusement, only a tightly controlled anger. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her body tense with the effort of restraining herself from intervention. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. She had seen everything, and she wanted to help, but they both knew what speaking up would cost her. The guards released Xavier at the revolving doors, giving him a final push that was more for show than necessity. He straightened his sweater, adjusted his sleeves with deliberate calm, and stepped outside into the morning air. From behind him, he could hear Ashley's voice, carried through the closing door. "God, some people just don't know their place." Xavier paused on the sidewalk, extracting his phone from his pocket. He glanced at the screen, then back at the building. Through the glass walls, he could see Ashley already returning to her desk, laughing with co-workers who had gathered to hear her. Retelling of the encounter, she picked up her phone, still smirking, and froze as it buzzed with a notification. He turned and walked away, each step measured and unhurried. Behind him, the first tremors of the earthquake he was about to unleash were already beginning. Security released Xavier at the gleaming revolving doors, but not without a final show of dominance. The taller guard gave him a firm shove between the shoulder blades, propelling him forward with unnecessary force. "Don't come back without an actual appointment," he called out, loud enough for the gathering audience in the lobby to hear. A smattering of chuckles followed the remark. Xavier took a moment to straighten his sweater, where the guard's grip had wrinkled the fine cashmere. He adjusted his cuffs with meticulous precision, his movements deliberate and unhurried. To the casual observer, he might have appeared unaffected, but the slight tightening around his eyes revealed a carefully controlled anger. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of the young woman still watching from the mezzanine. Their eyes met briefly, hers wide with recognition and a silent apology, his with an almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Then he was gone, striding, away from Brightwell Enterprises with measured steps. Inside the lobby, Ashley Monroe was already savoring her perceived victory. She returned to her desk with a triumphant smirk, high-fiving a co-worker who had witnessed the entire exchange. "Did you see his face?" she laughed, settling back into her chair. "These people always think they can just walk in anywhere." Her co-worker, a thin man with a carefully cultivated beard, leaned against her desk. What was he even trying to pull? Meeting with Richard Lawson? Please. I know, right? Ashley rolled her eyes dramatically. Like Richard would ever meet with someone like that. From above, Vanessa Lewis watched the scene with growing discomfort. As one of the few black managers at Brightwell, she'd witnessed similar situations before, though rarely so blatant. She recognized Xavier Cole immediately. His face had been on the cover of Forbes just last month. The fact that no one else had identified him, or worse, had recognized him and still allowed his humiliation, spoke volumes about Brightwell's culture. She gripped the railing tighter, knuckles whitening. She should say something. She should walk down there right now and call out what had just happened. But the reality of her position hit her like a physical weight. She'd fought too hard for her role at Brightwell, endured too many microaggressions, worked twice as hard for half the recognition. One wrong move, one moment of being labeled difficult or confrontational, and her career trajectory would flatline. So she remained silent, hating herself for it, even as she understood the impossible choice. Downstairs, the commotion had attracted more attention. A cluster of junior executives hovered near the reception desk, eager to hear Ashley's embellished retelling of the encounter. He actually tried to claim he was some big CEO. Ashley laughed, her voice carrying across the lobby. I mean, come on, if you're going to lie, at least make it believable. What did security do? Asked a young woman from accounting. Ashley mimicked a shoving motion with glee. Practically threw him out on his ass. God, the look on his face. From the executive elevator, Mark Reynolds re-emerged, now accompanied by two other senior managers. He paused, catching the tail end of Ashley's performance, and approached the reception desk with slow, deliberate steps. Quite the excitement this morning, he remarked, his voice carrying just enough authority to silence the chatter immediately. Ashley straightened, her expression shifting to professional deference. Just doing my job, Mr. Reynolds. Keeping out the riffraff. Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. And who exactly was our unwelcome visitor claiming to be? Some guy named Xavier Cole, Ashley replied with a dismissive wave. Said he had a meeting with Richard, as if a flicker of something, concern perhaps, crossed Mark's face, but it was quickly masked by a benign smile. Well, good work, Ashley. Can't have just anyone walking in claiming to be important. He turned to the others. Back to work, everyone. The show's over. As the group dispersed, Mark lingered at Ashley's desk. Just out of curiosity, he said casually, what exactly did you say to him? Ashley preened under the executive's attention. Oh, you know, the usual, that he should go to the delivery entrance. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. And I might have suggested he dress better next time he tries to sneak into a place like this. Mark's laugh sounded forced. Creative. He glanced at his watch. I have a meeting to attend. Carry on, Ashley. As he walked away, Mark pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Anyone watching closely might have noticed the slight tremble in his hands. Back at her desk, Ashley was riding the high of approval from a senior executive. She spun in her chair, giggling as she recounted the incident to another receptionist who had just arrived for her shift. I swear, Jennifer, you should have seen his face when security grabbed him. Priceless. Jennifer seemed less amused. What did he look like, this guy who claimed to be a CEO? Ashley shrugged. Tall, well-built, dark skin, trying to look rich in a fancy sweater, but you can always tell, you know? Jennifer's expression shifted. Wait, was he wearing a charcoal sweater? With a Patek Philippe watch? Ashley's brow furrowed. How should I know what kind of watch? Ashley, Jennifer interrupted, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Did he say his name was Xavier Cole? As in the Xavier Cole? Of Cole Innovations? Yeah, that's what he... Ashley began, then stopped abruptly as the implications of Jennifer's tone registered. Wait, who's Xavier Cole? Jennifer's face had gone pale. Only the billionaire CEO that Richard has been courting for a partnership for the last 6 months, the deal that's supposed to save Brightwell from the takeover rumors. Ashley's smugness dissolved instantly. No, she said, the word barely audible. No, that can't be right. He didn't look like what, Ashley? Jennifer's voice had a sharp edge. Like a billionaire? What exactly does a billionaire look like to you? The color drained from Ashley's face as the full weight of her actions began to sink in. But Mark Reynolds saw him too, she protested, weakly. He didn't say anything. He approved of how I handled it. Jennifer was already typing furiously on her computer. Mark Reynolds has been openly against the Cole partnership from the beginning. Word is he's been backdoor dealing with Nexus Tech, trying to position himself for a golden parachute if Brightwell goes under. She turned the screen toward Ashley. And this is Xavier Cole. The webpage displayed a professional photo of the same man Ashley had just humiliated in the lobby. The article headline read, Cole Innovations CEO revolutionizes cybersecurity industry. Valuation reaches $8 billion. Oh my God, Ashley whispered, hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, what did I do? Before Jennifer could respond, a commotion from the executive floor captured their attention. The elevators opened, and Richard Lawson, CEO of Brightwell Enterprises, emerged, his face flushed with either anger or panic. Probably both. He was flanked by his personal assistant and the head of legal counsel, both looking equally distressed. Where is he? Richard demanded, his voice echoing across the suddenly silent lobby. Where is Xavier Cole? Ashley sank lower in her chair, trying to make herself invisible. It didn't work. Ashley, Richard bellowed, striding toward the reception desk. I was told there was an incident with Mr. Cole. What happened? All eyes turned. To Ashley, who sat frozen, her earlier confidence evaporated. I didn't think he was really... You didn't think? Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Do you have any idea what you've done? From the mezzanine, Vanessa Lewis watched the unfolding chaos with a mixture of vindication and concern. She'd been right about Xavier Cole's identity, and now everyone knew it. But she also understood that this disaster would have ripple effects through the entire company, potentially affecting her own position. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, not recognizing the number. She answered tentatively. Is this Vanessa Lewis? The voice was deep, measured, and somehow familiar. Yes. Who is this? My name is Xavier Cole. I believe you witnessed what happened in the lobby today. Vanessa's breath caught. Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry about what happened. I should have intervened. I should have... You were the only one who wanted to, Xavier interrupted gently. I saw it in your face. You wanted to speak up, but couldn't risk your position. I understand that calculation better than most. Vanessa moved to a quieter corner, away from the chaos below. How did you get my number? I make it my business to know the key players in any company I consider partnering with, Xavier replied. Your work on the neural network security protocol is impressive. You're being underutilized at Brightwell. Vanessa was momentarily speechless. Xavier Cole had researched her work? Mr. Cole, about what happened, I'd like to meet with you, he said, cutting off her apology. Not at Brightwell. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., the Emerson Hotel restaurant. Yes, of course, Vanessa stammered. Good. And Ms. Lewis? What happened today wasn't just about me. It was about a culture that permitting it to happen. Remember that. The line went dead, leaving Vanessa staring at her phone in disbelief. Below her, the lobby had erupted into frantic activity. Richard was on his phone, gesticulating wildly while his assistant attempted to calm him. The legal counsel was already drafting something on his tablet. And Ashley? Ashley sat at her desk utterly still as the storm swirled around her. Vanessa's attention was drawn to Mark Reynolds, who stood apart from the chaos, his expression unreadable as he watched the fallout of his deliberate inaction. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, Vanessa knew that the power dynamics at Brightwell were about to be irrevocably altered. In his sleek black Bentley, Xavier Cole sat quietly as his driver navigated through city traffic. He scrolled through the detailed profiles of Brightwell's key executives on his tablet, information gathered months ago in preparation for the potential partnership. His finger paused over Mark Reynolds's file, lingering on notes about the man's resistance to the Cole Innovations deal and his connections to competing firms. Xavier's phone pinged with a message from his assistant. Legal team assembled and waiting. For your instructions, he typed a brief response. Proceed as discussed. Full termination of all potential agreements with Brightwell. Activate contingency plan Delta. Leaning back against the leather seat, Xavier gazed out at the city skyline. His expression remained calm, but his eyes held the calculated focus of a chess master visualizing the endgame many moves ahead. Where to, sir? His driver asked. The office, Xavier replied. There's been a change of plans. As the car accelerated smoothly into traffic, Xavier allowed himself a small, tight smile. The pieces were in motion. By the end of the day, the tremors would become an earthquake. By the end of the week, Brightwell Enterprises would understand exactly who they had disrespected, and by the end of the month, they would no longer exist. Back at Brightwell, Ashley's phone chimed with a company-wide email notification. With trembling fingers, she unlocked her screen to read the message. Urgent. All senior management report to conference room A immediately. Partnership emergency. Security footage attached. Ashley clicked on the attachment and watched in horror, as high-definition video showed her entire interaction with Xavier Cole from multiple angles, including her sneering comments, her physical grabbing of his arm, and the security guard's rough handling. The footage had no audio, but her expression and body language told the entire damning story. As she stared at the screen, another email arrived in her inbox. This one was addressed specifically to her. Ms. Monroe, your presence is required at an immediate disciplinary hearing. Please report to HR Conference Room C at 11 CODS a.m. sharp. Human Resources Department, Brightwell Enterprises. The timestamp on the email was 10:55 a.m. She had 5 minutes. As Ashley rose from her desk on unsteady legs, a final email notification appeared. To all Brightwell employees, due to unforeseen circumstances, today's company update will be delayed. Please continue normal operations until further notice. Richard Lawson, CEO, Brightwell Enterprises. But there was nothing normal about the panic spreading through the building. As Ashley made her way to the HR department, she passed groups of employees, huddled in whispered conversation, their eyes following her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. News traveled fast in corporate environments, and the story of how a receptionist had potentially tanked a multi-million-dollar partnership was spreading like wildfire. In the executive suite, Richard Lawson slammed his fist onto the conference table. How could this happen? How could we let this happen? Mark Reynolds maintained his composure, though beads of sweat had formed along his hairline. Richard, let's not overreact. Cole is a businessman. He'll get over a simple misunderstanding. Richard turned on him, eyes blazing. A simple misunderstanding? Our security guards physically manhandled a man worth billions. A man who controls the very technology we need to survive the quarter. He jabbed a finger at the frozen image on the conference room screen, showing Mark clearly witnessing the incident. And you recognized him. Don't deny it. I can see it in your face on the goddamn security footage. You recognized Xavier Cole and you said nothing. Mark's carefully constructed facade began to crack. I wasn't certain it was him. And if it was, why would he show up unannounced, dressed like that? Without an entourage or, because that's who he is, Richard shouted. If you'd bothered to read any of the briefing materials, you'd know Cole is famous for his unannounced visits. It's how he assesses company culture before finalizing deals. He collapsed into a chair, running shaking hands through his hair. This partnership was our lifeline, Mark. Without Cole's technology integration, we're dead in the water against Nexus Tech's new platform. As if summoned by the mention, Richard's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed, James Harper, Nexus Tech CEO. Richard and Mark exchanged a look of pure dread. It had already begun. On the mezzanine level, Vanessa Lewis quietly gathered her personal items from her desk, slipping them into her purse. Her resignation letter, drafted months ago during a particularly demoralizing performance review where her innovations had been credited to a white male colleague, sat ready to send in her email drafts. She took one last look at the Brightwell logo mounted on the wall, then clicked send on the resignation email. Her calendar notification chimed softly, reminding her of tomorrow's breakfast meeting with Xavier Cole. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. The air inside Brightwell's executive boardroom crackled with tension. Richard Lawson paced back and forth, his expensive Italian loafers wearing an invisible path into the plush carpet. Every few seconds he checked his watch, then his phone, his movements becoming increasingly agitated with each passing minute. He should have been here 30 minutes ago, Richard muttered, loosening his tie as sweat beaded on his forehead. Where the hell is he? The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, exchanging nervous glances. The stakes of this meeting couldn't be higher. The partnership with Cole Innovations represented not just growth but survival for Brightwell. After losing ground to competitors for 3 consecutive quarters, this deal was their lifeline. Maybe. Traffic? Suggested Christina Wells, CFO, her voice lacking conviction. Richard shot her a withering look. Xavier Cole has a helicopter and 3 drivers. He doesn't get stuck in traffic. The room fell silent again, save for the rhythmic tapping of Richard's fingers against the polished mahogany table. The presentation they'd prepared, projections showing a 43% increase in market share with Cole's proprietary algorithms integrated into their systems, remained untouched on the screen. The double doors swung open and every head turned expectantly. But instead of Xavier Cole, Mark Reynolds strolled in, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He took his time settling into a chair, seemingly oblivious to the charged atmosphere. What did I miss? Mark asked, glancing around the table. Richard's jaw clenched. Nothing yet. We're still waiting for Cole. Mark checked his watch with exaggerated movement. Not very professional to be this late, is it? Christina shot him a sharp look. Mark, this isn't the time. Before Mark could respond, Richard's phone buzzed. He snatched it up, relief washing over his face as he read the screen. He's here. That's his team letting security know they've arrived. The tension in the room shifted from anxiety to anticipatory excitement. Executives straightened papers, adjusted ties, and put on their most professional expressions. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. The doors opened again. This time, a young assistant entered, her face pale. Sir, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a situation. Richard frowned. What kind of situation? Xavier Cole is supposed to be... That's just it, sir. The assistant interrupted, holding out her phone. You need to see this. Richard took the phone, his expression morphing from confusion to horror as he read the screen. The color drained from his face in rapid succession, leaving him ashen and unsteady. No, he whispered, gripping the edge of the table for support. No, no, no. Christina leaned forward. Richard, what is it? Without speaking, Richard turned the phone so the others could see. On the screen was an email sent to every major tech publication in the country. The subject line read, Xavier Cole has left the building. What does that mean? Asked Thomas Byers, the head of development. Left what building? Ours, Richard said, his voice hollow. He was here. Xavier Cole was in our building this morning. Mark's smug expression faltered. That's impossible. We would have known if... He came alone. Unannounced. Richard's voice rose with each word. It's what he does before finalizing major partnerships, assesses the company culture firsthand. His gaze hardened as it landed on Mark. And apparently, we failed the test. The silence that followed was deafening. Each executive mentally calculated what this meant for their careers, their stock options, their futures. There has to be some mistake, Christina finally said. We can fix this. Where's Xavier now? Richard shook his head, already moving toward the door. Gone. The email says he's terminating all partnership discussions with Brightwell, effective immediately. He paused at the threshold, turning back to face the stunned room. And if anyone's curious about why, there's a video being circulated along with the press release. Apparently, our front desk staff and security physically removed him from the building this morning. He stormed out, leaving behind a boardroom of executives frozen in disbelief. Mark Reynolds sat very still, his earlier confidence evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization of what was coming. Down in the lobby, Richard Lawson emerged from the elevator like a gathering storm. Employees scattered from his path as he marched toward the reception desk where Ashley was casually sipping coffee, completely unaware of the catastrophe she had unleashed. Where's Xavier Cole? Richard demanded, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent lobby. Ashley looked up, confusion written across her face. Who? The momentary blankness in her expression quickly shifted as realization dawned. Her eyes widened in horror as the pieces connected. Wait, the guy from earlier? Her voice had lost all its previous confidence, reduced to a trembling whisper. Richard's hands shook visibly as he planted them on her desk, leaning in until his face was inches from hers. That guy is the owner of Cole Innovations, the man we were supposed to partner with, the deal that was going to save this company. Each sentence was delivered with increasing intensity. Where is he? Ashley's mouth opened and closed several times before she could form words. He left. Security. I thought he was... You thought? Richard's voice cracked with strain. It wasn't your job to think, Ashley. It was your job to check the goddamn appointment book. He straightened, running a hand through his hair, in agitation. Get me security footage, now. I want to see exactly what happened. As Ashley fumbled with her computer, Richard spun around, barking orders at a nearby assistant. Get him back. I don't care what it takes. Call his office, send a car, offer him the damn building if you have to. Just get Xavier Cole back here. The lobby had become an audience to Ashley's downfall. Colleagues who had laughed along with her earlier now kept their distance, whispering behind cupped hands. The schadenfreude was palpable. The receptionist who had wielded her small power so carelessly was finally facing consequences. Mark Reynolds emerged from the elevator, deliberately slowing his pace as he approached. His composure had returned, though a slight sheen of sweat betrayed his nerves. Richard, he said, his voice carrying fake concern. Let's not overreact. So the receptionist was rude to a potential partner. It's unfortunate, but hardly the end of the world. Cole runs a business, he knows these things happen. Richard turned to face Mark, disbelief etched into his features. Overreact? You still don't get it, do you? Xavier Cole doesn't need us. We need him. His neural integration algorithms are the only thing that could have given us an edge against Nexus Tech's new platform. Mark waved a dismissive hand. Come on, it's not like he's going to sink us over this. It's just a PR issue. We'll send a gift basket, make a donation to some diversity charity and move on. Richard looked at Mark like he'd grown a second head. You have no idea what you've done. What I've done? I saw the security footage, Richard said, his voice dangerously low. You were there. You recognized him. I could see it in your face. And you chose to say nothing. His finger jabbed into Mark's chest. Why? Because you've been against this partnership from day one? Because you've been secretly courting Nexus Tech as a backup plan? Mark's face hardened. That's a serious accusation, Richard. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. HR forwarded me your emails yesterday, the ones you've been sending from your personal account to James Harper. Richard's smile was cold. You really should be more careful about using company Wi-Fi for your betrayals. The color drained from Mark's face. Richard, I can explain. Save it for the board, Richard snapped, turning away. I have a company to save. If that's even possible now. Ashley Monroe sat frozen at her desk, the reality of her situation sinking in like ice water through her veins. Wait, What? She whispered, more to herself than anyone around her. The revelation that she had not only insulted but physically removed a billionaire CEO, the very person whose partnership could save Brightwell, left her in a state of suspended shock. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by a hollow pit in her stomach and trembling hands that couldn't even hold her coffee cup steady. Around her, the lobby had transformed into a nerve center of crisis management. Richard Lawson was shouting into his phone, his face flushed with desperation. "I don't care if he's in a meeting. This is an emergency. Tell Xavier Cole that Richard Lawson needs 5 minutes of his time. Just 5 minutes." Assistants scurried back and forth, carrying tablets with rapidly declining stock projections. Word was spreading fast. Cole Innovations had formally withdrawn from partnership discussions, and the market was already responding. "Get him back," Richard barked at an assistant. "Send a car. I don't care what it takes. Get him here." The assistant, looking pale, nodded and rushed off, though everyone knew it was futile. The damage was done. Ashley's co-workers, the same. Ones who had laughed along with her mockery just hours before, now kept their distance, eyeing her with a mixture of pity and blame. She had become toxic by association, the emblem of Brightwell's failing culture. "They can't blame this all on me," she whispered to Jennifer, who had reluctantly returned to the reception desk. "I mean, security was involved too, and Mark Reynolds saw everything." Jennifer just shook her head. "Ashley, you need to prepare yourself. They're looking for a scapegoat, and front desk staff is a lot more expendable than senior management." As if to confirm her words, a stern-faced woman from HR approached, security badge held prominently. "Ms. Monroe, I need you to come with me." Immediately, Ashley's legs felt like lead as she stood, her designer heels suddenly unsteady beneath her. Am I being fired?" The HR representative's face remained impassive. "We're conducting a full review of this morning's incident. Your presence is required in conference room C." As Ashley was led away, the whispers followed her like a shadow. On the mezzanine level, Vanessa Lewis watched the unfolding chaos with mixed emotions. Part of her felt vindicated. The casual racism and classism she'd witnessed daily at Brightwell was finally being exposed. Another part recognized that the company's implosion would affect everyone, including those who had played no part in today's disaster. Her phone vibrated with another text from Xavier Cole. "Decision made. Brightwell partnership terminated. Opportunity. Discussion tomorrow still stands." 8 a.m. Vanessa typed a quick confirmation, then returned to observing the pandemonium below. She noticed Mark Reynolds slipping away from the main commotion, his face set in grim determination as he headed toward his private office. The executive who had smirked at Xavier's humiliation now looked hunted, his usual swagger replaced by furtive glances. In his penthouse office across town, Xavier Cole sat at his desk, the city skyline sprawling before him through floor-to-ceiling windows. Unlike the chaos at Brightwell, his space was a picture of calm efficiency. His legal team had presented their strategy, his PR department had released a measured statement, and his technical division was already pivoting toward an alternative partnership. "Sir," his assistant said from the doorway, "Richard Lawson has called 17 times in the past hour. He's becoming increasingly desperate." Xavier didn't look up from the document he was reviewing. "No response necessary." And Nexus Tech's CEO James Harper is on line 1. He says it's urgent. At this, Xavier allowed himself a small smile. "Put him through." He picked up the sleek phone on his desk. "James." "What a surprise." "Xavier." Harper's voice carried a forced casualness. "I heard about the Brightwell situation. Unfortunate." "Indeed. Well, one company's loss is another's opportunity. I'd like to discuss reopening our partnership conversations. Your neural integration technology paired with our market presence could be—" "James," Xavier interrupted smoothly. "Let me stop you there. My company doesn't partner with organizations that maintain back channels with executives like Mark Reynolds." The silence on the other end was telling. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Harper finally said, his voice noticeably cooler. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. Mark Reynolds has been feeding you Brightwell's confidential information for months, including details of my potential partnership. Your company has encouraged this corporate espionage. Xavier's tone remained pleasant, though his words carried steel. That's not how I do business, Xavier. I assure you. This conversation is over, James, and so is any potential collaboration between our companies. Xavier hung up, turning his attention back to his tablet. On the screen was the security footage from Brightwell's lobby, paused on Ashley Monroe's sneering face as she whispered in his ear. He studied it for a moment, then closed the file. His assistant reappeared at the door. Your legal team would like to know if you want to proceed with the formal complaint against both Ashley Monroe and Mark Reynolds personally, in addition to the corporate actions. Xavier nodded once. Proceed as planned. All of it. Back at Brightwell, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. News of Xavier's rejection had leaked to the press, and reporters had begun gathering outside the building. Social media was already ablaze with rumors, further driving down Brightwell's stock price by the minute. In conference room C, Ashley sat alone, her phone confiscated by HR. Through the glass walls, she could see executives rushing past, none making eye contact. She had become radioactive. The door opened, and the head of HR entered, accompanied by the legal counsel. Their expressions told her everything she needed to know. Ms. Monroe, the HR director began formally. After reviewing the security footage and speaking with witnesses, Brightwell Enterprises is terminating your employment, effective immediately. Ashley had expected this, but the reality still hit her like a physical blow. I understand, she managed, her voice barely audible. Can I at least get my things? Security will escort you to collect personal items only. Your company, credentials and devices are being deactivated as we speak. As they outlined the terms of her departure, no severance, no references, a non-disclosure agreement she was required to sign, Ashley's mind drifted to the mortgage she had just taken out, the car payments, the credit card debt from her designer, wardrobe, her entire carefully constructed life built on the precarious foundation of a job she had just lost. Additionally, the legal counsel added, sliding a document across the table, we need to inform you that this termination does not shield you from potential personal liability. Mr. Cole's legal team has indicated they may pursue separate action against individuals involved in today's incident. Ashley felt the blood drain from her face. Personal liability? You mean they could sue me? Personally? The lawyer's expression remained neutral. That would be at Mr. Cole's discretion. In the executive suite, Richard Lawson was facing his own nightmare. His assistant had just delivered the latest news. Cole Innovations had not only withdrawn from their partnership discussions, but had announced a strategic alliance with DataSphere, Brightwell's smaller but more innovative competitor. They moved that fast? Richard asked incredulously. The deal with us fell apart hours ago. Apparently they've been in preliminary talks for weeks, his assistant explained, checking her tablet. It looks like Cole was evaluating multiple options, and DataSphere was their backup plan. Or we were the backup plan, Richard muttered, the realization hitting him hard. The knock on his door interrupted his spiral of despair. Christina Wells, the CFO, entered without waiting for permission, her tablet clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Richard, we have a serious problem. The stock is in free fall. We've lost 18% in the last hour alone. Richard collapsed into his chair. How bad will it get? If we don't stop the bleeding, we could be looking at a 30% drop by closing today. The market is reacting to both the lost partnership and... She hesitated. And what? And the video, Christina finished reluctantly. Someone leaked the security footage to social media. It's everywhere, Richard. Ashley telling Xavier Cole to go to the welfare office, security man handling him. It's a PR nightmare. Richard's phone began ringing again. It was the board chair. Christina, get me options. Any options. I need something to tell the board. As she left, Mark Reynolds appeared in the doorway, his usual confidence shattered. Richard, we need to talk. It's not as bad as it looks. Richard didn't bother hiding his contempt. Not as bad? Mark, we're in freefall. Our stock is crashing. Our reputation is in tatters, and we just lost the one partnership that could have saved us. Please enlighten me on how this isn't as bad as it looks. Mark closed the door behind him, lowering his voice. Look, I know you found my emails to Harper, but you don't have the full picture. I was playing both sides, yes, but only to strengthen our bargaining position with Cole. Spare me, Richard snapped. The board meeting is in 20 minutes. You can explain your strategy to them. Mark's facade finally cracked. Richard, please. My stock options, my reputation. You can't do this to me after 15 years. Richard's laugh was bitter. I'm not doing anything to you, Mark. You did this to yourself. He gestured to the door. Now get out of my office. I have a company to try to save. Left alone, Richard stared out at the city skyline, the same view Xavier Cole had from his office across town. The parallel wasn't lost on him, but where Xavier's empire was thriving, Richard's was on the brink of collapse. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. What's happening? CNN is showing footage of your company refusing entry to Xavier Cole. Call me. Richard closed his eyes, the full weight of the disaster crushing down on him. In a single morning, everything he'd built over 2 decades was crumbling, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. At Xavier's office, his senior team had gathered for a debriefing. The mood was professional, but tinged with satisfaction. Datasphere is ecstatic, reported his chief strategy officer. They're prepared to move forward immediately with the integration plans. Good, Xavier nodded. And Brightwell? His chief financial officer consulted her tablet. Their stock is down 22% and still falling. Early projections suggest they'll lose at least 3 major clients by end of week, and without our neural integration, they have no competitive edge against Nexus Tech's new platform. Sir, his PR director interjected, social media is overwhelmingly supportive of your position. The security footage has gone viral, with most commentators condemning Brightwell's culture. Xavier took this all in silently, his expression revealing nothing of his inner thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and calm. This was never about revenge, he said, looking around the table at his executive team. What happened this morning was a symptom of a disease that's far too common in our industry. We're simply allowing the natural consequences to unfold. He rose from his chair, signaling the end of the meeting. Now, I have a breakfast appointment to prepare for. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. As his team filed out, Xavier turned to gaze at the city below. In the reflection of the glass, he could see his own expression, not of triumph or satisfaction, but of quiet resolution. This was just the beginning. The boardroom at Brightwell. Enterprises had transformed from a place of power to a war room of crisis management. Richard Lawson stood at the head of the table, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, and tie loosened as he faced the grim-faced board members. Digital displays around the room showed real-time stock ticker information, each updating with increasingly alarming numbers. 26%, announced Christina Wells, her voice tight with stress as she refreshed her tablet. We're now down 26% and still falling. The board chair, Elizabeth Hamilton, a steel-haired woman in her 60s who had navigated multiple market crashes in her career, looked more concerned than Richard had ever seen her. Walk us through exactly what happened, Richard. No corporate speak, no sugarcoating. Richard ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Xavier Cole came to our offices this morning for an unannounced preliminary visit, something he's known to do before finalizing major partnerships. Our receptionist failed to recognize him, treated him with blatant disrespect, and had security physically remove him from the building. Failed to recognize him? Repeated Thomas Byers, a board member. The man's face has been on the cover of every business magazine in the last year. It gets worse, Richard continued, his voice strained. Mark Reynolds was there. He recognized Cole and chose to say nothing. Instead, he encouraged the situation. All eyes turned to Mark, who sat at the far end of the table, physically distanced from the others. His usual confident demeanor had vanished, replaced by a defensive posture and darting eyes. That's an exaggeration, Mark protested weakly. I arrived at the tail end of the interaction. I wasn't sure it was him. We have the security footage, Mark, Richard cut in sharply. He nodded to an assistant who pressed a button, and the large screen at the end of the room displayed the damning video. The board watched in horrified silence as the scene unfolded. Ashley's contemptuous dismissal, the security guard's rough handling, and most damaging of all, Mark Reynolds clearly recognizing Xavier, then walking away with a smirk after making his "handle these types" comment. When the video ended, the room remained silent for several painful seconds. "I was playing devil's advocate," Mark finally said, his voice hollow, testing to see how he'd respond to adversity. Elizabeth Hamilton's laugh was cold and sharp. "Save it for your wrongful termination lawsuit, Mark. You'll need better excuses than that." Before Mark could respond, the boardroom door burst open. A pale-faced assistant rushed in, clutching a tablet. "Sir, Cole's legal team is on the line. They're terminating all partnership discussions, effective immediately." Though they'd all known this was coming, hearing it confirmed sent a fresh wave of panic through the room. Richard took the tablet with shaking hands, putting the call on speaker. "This is Richard Lawson. I understand your position, but I'm requesting an opportunity to meet with Mr. Cole personally." "What happened today, Mr. Lawson?" The crisp voice of Xavier's chief counsel interrupted. "My client has made his decision final. Cole Innovations hereby terminates all partnership negotiations with Brightwell Enterprises, citing irreconcilable ethical differences in corporate culture." "We can address those concerns," Richard pleaded, aware of how desperate he sounded. "We've already terminated the employees involved." "Additionally," the lawyer continued as if Richard hadn't spoken, "Mr. Cole has instructed me to inform you that Cole Innovations will be issuing a press statement within the hour, clarifying that the termination of this potential partnership is due to Brightwell's demonstrated failure to maintain a respectful and inclusive corporate environment. Good day." The line went dead, leaving Richard staring at the tablet in disbelief. "That's it then," Elizabeth said quietly. "The Cole deal is dead." Christina's tablet chimed with another alert. "And our stock just dropped another 3 points on that news. We're approaching 30% down." Richard placed the tablet on the table with deliberate care, as though it might shatter under pressure. "It gets worse. Without Cole's neural integration technology, our platform can't compete with Nexus Tech's new release next quarter. We'll find another partner," suggested one board member half-heartedly. Richard shook his head. "Cole's algorithms are proprietary and years ahead of the competition. There is no other partner." Elizabeth Hamilton surveyed the room, her gaze finally settling on Mark Reynolds. "I believe we need to discuss individual accountability. Mark, would you care to explain why you've been having secret communications with James Harper at Nexus Tech?" The color drained from Mark's face. "Those were exploratory discussions only, standard industry networking. Sharing confidential Brightwell strategy documents is standard networking?" Elizabeth raised a silver eyebrow. "The board has reviewed your emails, Mark. You've been actively undermining this company while collecting your 7-figure salary." As Mark stammered through increasingly incoherent excuses, Richard's phone began ringing incessantly. Each call represented another disaster. Major clients requesting emergency meetings, investors demanding explanations, reporters seeking comments on the viral video that was now circulating online. The wheels had come off, and everyone in the room knew it. Meanwhile, in a sparse but functional office on the mezzanine level, Vanessa Lewis was methodically clearing out her desk. Though she had already submitted her resignation, she found herself wanting a clean break, physically removing herself from Brightwell before the full collapse she knew was coming. Her phone vibrated with an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Hello? Ms. Lewis? This is Thomas Reed, Xavier Cole's chief of staff. Mr. Cole asked me to confirm your breakfast meeting tomorrow at the Emerson Hotel, 8 a.m. Vanessa paused in her packing. "Yes, I'll be there." "Excellent. Mr. Cole also wanted me to inform you that he was impressed by your neural network security protocols from last year's cybersecurity conference. The presentation that your supervisor took credit for." Vanessa's breath caught. "How did he—" "Mr. Cole makes it his business to know who actually creates the innovations he admires," Thomas replied simply. "He's looking forward to discussing potential opportunities with you tomorrow." As she ended the call, Vanessa noticed Ashley being escorted down the hallway by security, the former receptionist's face blotchy with tears as she clutched a small box of personal items. Their eyes met briefly. Ashley's pleading, Vanessa's impassive. There was no satisfaction in watching another woman's downfall, even one who had participated in the systemic problems at Brightwell. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. Vanessa returned to packing her belongings, more certain than ever that she had made the right decision. Back in the boardroom, the crisis had escalated further. Richard's assistant reappeared, this time looking as though she might faint. "Sir, we have a bigger problem. The security footage. It's been leaked online." Richard's head snapped up. "What? How?" "We don't know, but it's gone viral. Multiple news outlets are running it, social media is exploding, and..." She hesitated. "And what?" Richard demanded. "And they've identified Ashley Monroe by name. Her social media accounts are being flooded with messages. It's not good." Richard looked to the company's PR director, who simply shook his head. "There's no spinning this, Richard. The footage speaks for itself." On the other side of the city, Xavier Cole sat calmly in his office, watching the fallout unfold on multiple screens. Unlike the chaotic environment at Brightwell, Cole Innovations operated with precision even in crisis. His team had executed his contingency plan flawlessly, each department playing their role in what was less a vindictive attack than a strategic repositioning. "Sir," his assistant said from the doorway, "your 1 o'clock is here." Xavier nodded, standing to greet Daniel Chen, CEO of Datasphere, the smaller but more innovative competitor to Brightwell that had been on Xavier's radar for months. "Daniel," Xavier said warmly, shaking the man's hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Daniel Chen, a shrewd businessman in his early 40s, smiled as he took a seat. "When Xavier Cole calls, you make time. Though I admit, I was surprised given your negotiations with Brightwell." "Those discussions have been terminated," Xavier replied simply. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. "I saw the video. Unfortunate situation." "Indeed. However, it clarified some concerns I'd had about Brightwell's culture." Xavier pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared between them, showing technical specifications. "I believe Datasphere's approach to quantum encryption aligns better with our neural integration framework." Daniel leaned forward, studying the display with keen interest. "We've been developing this architecture for 3 years, but we lacked the processing power your algorithms could provide." "Then perhaps we have the foundation for a mutually beneficial partnership," Xavier suggested. As they delved into technical discussions, Xavier's phone buzzed with an update. Brightwell's stock had now fallen 32%, triggering circuit breakers to temporarily halt trading. The dominoes were falling exactly as he had anticipated. Back at Brightwell, Ashley Monroe sat alone in her car, in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel though the engine remained off. Her phone continued to vibrate with notifications, hundreds of messages flooding her social media accounts, most of them scathing. The personal items she'd been allowed to collect sat in a pathetic pile on the passenger seat. A coffee mug, some photographs, a small plant. Everything else, her company laptop, security badge, even the awards she'd received for excellence in client relations, had been confiscated. 7 years at Brightwell ended in a matter of hours. Her phone rang with her mother's ringtone. With trembling fingers, she answered, "Mom?" "Ashley, what's going on? Your sister just called me. She said you're all over the internet. Something about you being racist to some important man?" Ashley closed her eyes, feeling the tears start again. "It's complicated, Mom. I messed up really bad." "Well, fix it," her mother said, as if it were that simple. "Apologize or whatever you need to do." "I don't think an apology is going to fix this," Ashley whispered, opening her eyes to check her phone notifications. The messages were getting worse. People had found her address. Her LinkedIn profile was being flooded with comments. Someone had even contacted her landlord. As she sat there, paralyzed by the magnitude of what was happening, A new email appeared on her screen. The sender, Xavier Coles, legal team. The subject line, notice of intent to file suit. With shaking hands, she opened it, reading the formal legal language that informed her of Xavier Coles' intent to pursue personal charges against her for harassment, defamation, and discriminatory behavior. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor of her car as the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. This wasn't just about losing her job. Her entire life was unraveling. By the following morning, Brightwell Enterprises was in free fall. News vans lined the street outside their headquarters, reporters clutching microphones as they delivered live updates against the backdrop of the once prestigious building. The company's stock had plunged over 40% since trading resumed, wiping out billions in market value overnight. Inside, the atmosphere was apocalyptic. Employees huddled in small groups, whispering anxiously about layoffs and severance packages. The executive floor had become a revolving door of emergency meetings, each bringing worse news than the last. Richard Lawson hadn't left the building. His rumpled suit and shadowed eyes testament to a sleepless night spent trying to salvage the unsalvageable. He sat now in his office, phone pressed to his ear, as he pleaded with Brightwell's largest client. "James, we've been partners for 12 years, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "This situation with Cole doesn't affect our ability to deliver on our contract." The reply was brief and devastating. Richard's face fell as he listened. "I understand," he finally said, his voice hollow. "Yes, the termination clause requires 30 days' notice. We'll begin the transition immediately." He ended the call and dropped his phone onto the desk, staring blankly at the wall. Christina Wells entered without knocking, her usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. "That was Meridian Financial?" Richard nodded silently. "How bad?" "They're invoking the ethics clause to terminate our contract early," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. 12 years gone, and they're not alone. We've lost Arlington Systems and NextCore already." Christina sank into a chair. "That's 60% of our client base." 67, actually, Richard corrected. "And the others are just waiting for their legal teams to find the fastest way out of their contracts." The reality was stark. Brightwell was bleeding out. Without clients, without the Cole partnership, and with their stock in freefall, the company, that had taken Richard 20 years to build, was collapsing in real time. His phone buzzed with a text from the board chair. "Emergency board meeting, 1 p.m. Discussing options, including Chapter 11. Bankruptcy." The word he hadn't allowed himself to say aloud was now staring him in the face. Richard closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 300 employees' livelihoods on his shoulders. Across town, at the Emerson Hotel's upscale restaurant, Vanessa Lewis sat across from Xavier Cole, still processing the opportunity he had just presented. "Head of Neural Security Operations," she repeated. "At Cole Innovations." Xavier nodded, sipping his coffee. "Your work on adaptive security protocols is exactly what we need for the next generation of our platform. I've been following your research since that conference in Toronto. The one where—" "My supervisor took credit for my presentation," Vanessa said, the old bitterness seeping into her voice. "Yes," Xavier confirmed, though I knew immediately who the actual innovator was. "Mark Reynolds lacks the technical depth to have developed those algorithms." Vanessa studied him carefully. "Why me, Mr. Cole? Is this because I witnessed what happened yesterday?" Xavier set down his cup. "Call me Xavier. And no, this isn't about yesterday, at least not entirely. I've had my eye on you for some time, Ms. Lewis. Your talents are wasted at Brightwell, buried under layers of mediocre management and corporate politics. So this isn't about revenge?" Xavier's expression remained calm. "What happened yesterday merely accelerated a decision I was already considering. I don't operate on revenge, Ms. Lewis. I operate on recognizing value where others fail to see it." Vanessa considered this, turning the offer over in her mind. The salary Xavier had mentioned was double what she made at Brightwell, and the position would give her autonomy she had never been granted before. "I'd like to accept," she said finally, "but I need to be clear about something. I won't be used as a token, The black woman hired after a racism scandal. Xavier's smile held genuine respect. I don't hire tokens, Ms. Lewis. I hire the best people for the job. Your identity is a part of who you are, but your brilliance is why you're sitting at this table. He extended his hand, and Vanessa took it, feeling as though she were stepping onto solid ground after years of treading water. Meanwhile, Ashley Monroe sat in her apartment, blinds drawn against the reporters who had somehow found her address. Her phone had been turned off after an endless barrage of messages, some threatening, others mockingly suggesting she try applying at the welfare office she had referenced. Her laptop screen displayed her latest rejection email. She had desperately applied to 12 positions overnight, hoping her experience would outweigh the growing scandal. But each response was the same. We regret to inform you that we are pursuing other candidates at this time. The buzzer rang, causing her to jump. She approached the intercom cautiously. Who is it? Delivery for Ashley Monroe. Puzzled, she buzzed the person in. Minutes later, a knock at her door revealed a courier with a thick envelope requiring signature. As soon as she signed, the man handed her the package with a sympathetic look. Good luck, lady. You're gonna need it. Inside the envelope were legal papers, formal notification that Xavier Cole was proceeding with a personal lawsuit against her for discriminatory behavior, defamation, and creating a hostile environment. The damages sought, $2 million. Ashley collapsed onto her sofa, papers clutching in trembling hands. $2 million. She didn't have $2 million. She barely had $2,000 in savings. Her career was in ruins, her reputation destroyed. And now this, financial ruin on a scale she couldn't even comprehend. Her phone rang from where she had left it on the kitchen counter. Against her better judgment, she checked the caller ID. It was Mark Reynolds. Hello? She answered cautiously. Ashley, it's Mark. His voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable. Have you been served yet? The lawsuit? Yes, just now. He let out a bitter laugh. Welcome to the club. I got mine an hour ago. $5 million in my case. 5. Ashley couldn't even finish the sentence. What are we going to do? Do? There's nothing to do. Cole's legal team doesn't bring cases they can't win. The company's trying to distance themselves from us. They're claiming we acted outside company policy. But you're an executive. Can't you? I was an executive, Mark corrected bitterly. Past tense. The board terminated me this morning. No severance, no references, and they're considering clawing back my last 2 years of bonuses. Ashley's heart sank further. If they'd done that to Mark Reynolds, with his connections and 20 years of experience, what hope did she have? Look, Mark continued, his voice lowered. I'm calling because I heard something. Cole isn't just suing us personally. He's systematically destroying Brightwell. He bought a controlling interest in Meridian Financial this morning. The client that just dropped Brightwell? Exactly. And he's using his influence to ensure no other financial institution will work with us. He's coming after the company from all angles: legal, financial, public relations. By the end of the week, Brightwell won't exist. The scale of Xavier's response was staggering. Ashley had expected anger, perhaps even a lawsuit against the company. But this was the systematic dismantling of a corporate empire. Why? She whispered. Why go this far? Mark's laugh was hollow. Because he can. That's what you don't understand, Ashley. We didn't just insult some random black guy. We insulted one of the most powerful men in the tech industry, a man who could buy and sell Brightwell 10 times over. And we did it while being caught on camera making explicitly racist comments. After hanging up, Ashley opened her laptop and, against her better judgment, checked the news. The headlines confirmed everything Mark had said. Cole Innovations announces partnership with Datasphere. Brightwell stock plummets. Tech billionaire, Xavier. Cole acquires controlling interest in Meridian Financial. Brightwell Enterprises faces exodus of clients following racist incident. And most devastating of all, former Brightwell receptionist Ashley Monroe faces personal lawsuit from Xavier Cole. Her face, a still from the security footage showing her, smirking as she leaned in to make her welfare office comment, was everywhere. She had become the face of corporate racism overnight, her name forever linked to this incident. Her phone chimed with a text from her landlord. Need to discuss your lease situation given recent developments. Please call ASAP. Even her apartment wasn't safe anymore. Back at Brightwell, the emergency board meeting had reached its grim conclusion. Richard Lawson stood at the window of his office, soon to be his former office, gazing out at the city skyline. In the distance, he could see the gleaming tower that housed Cole Innovations. The board's decision had been unanimous: file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and begin an orderly liquidation of assets. It was the only option left. With major clients terminating contracts, investors fleeing, and no partnership to salvage, their technological gap, Brightwell was finished. His phone rang, the board chair following up on their meeting. "Elizabeth," he answered, his voice empty of emotion. "Richard, I've just received another update." "I thought you should hear it from me first," Elizabeth said, her usual steely tone softened with something like pity. "Cole Innovations has just announced an acquisition of Datasphere, with immediate integration of their quantum encryption platform." Richard closed his eyes. The final nail in the coffin. The deal that should have been Brightwell's was now strengthening their competitor. "I understand. There's more," Elizabeth continued reluctantly. "The SEC has opened a preliminary investigation into Mark's communications with Nexus Tech. They're looking at potential corporate espionage charges." Federal investigation. The words hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. This wasn't just about Brightwell's collapse anymore. This was about potential criminal charges. "Thank you for letting me know," Richard said mechanically. After ending the call, he turned back to his desk, where a framed photo showed him at Brightwell's IPO celebration 5 years earlier. Champagne in hand, future seemingly limitless. Now it was all gone, destroyed in a single morning by a cascade of terrible decisions. In the lobby below, employees were leaving in groups, carrying boxes of personal items. Security guards stood watch, a precaution given the company's precarious financial state. The Brightwell logo, once a proud symbol of innovation, now seemed like a relic of a company already consigned to history. Richard's phone chimed with a news alert. He looked down to see a simple social media post from Xavier Cole that had already garnered thousands of shares. "Respect is earned. So is failure." No explicit mention of Brightwell, no gloating. Just a simple statement of principle that said everything without saying anything at all. Outside Xavier Cole's office, the CEO of Cole Innovations reviewed the final papers for the Datasphere acquisition, each signature another step in his carefully orchestrated response. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reshaping the industry landscape in a way that eliminated companies that operated without integrity. "Sir," his assistant said from the doorway, "Vanessa Lewis has accepted the position. She'll be starting next Monday." Xavier nodded, satisfied. "Good. And the Brightwell building?" "Our real estate division has submitted a preliminary offer. Given their financial situation, we expect they'll accept quickly." Another piece falling into place. Where Brightwell had stood, something new would rise, something built on different principles. Xavier returned to the window, gazing out at the city that had shaped him. The confrontation at Brightwell's lobby hadn't just been about one receptionist's bias or one executive's deliberate blindness. It had been about an entire corporate culture that enabled such behavior, a culture that was now facing its natural conclusion, and in its place, Xavier would build something better. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at Brightwell Enterprises, but the aftershocks continued to reverberate through the tech industry. What had begun as a humiliating encounter in a corporate lobby had cascaded into the complete dismantling of a once formidable company. In Brightwell's half-empty headquarters, the remaining executive team huddled in what had become a daily ritual of damage control. The spacious boardroom, once a symbol of corporate success, now felt like a war bunker for the losing side. "Our legal team has reviewed the contracts again," said James Wilson, Brightwell's increasingly haggard chief counsel. "There's no way out. Every major client has invoked the ethics clause to terminate early." Richard Lawson barely reacted to the news. The past 3 weeks had beaten him down, each day bringing fresh disasters until he had reached a state of numb resignation. What about the government contracts? Those have different termination requirements. James shook his head. They've been canceled too. Someone at the Defense Department received an anonymous tip about Mark Reynolds' communications with Nexus Tech. They're citing security concerns. Anonymous tip, Richard repeated with a bitter laugh. Nothing about this has been anonymous. Every move has Xavier Cole's fingerprints all over it. Christina Wells, the last remaining C-suite executive besides Richard, slid a tablet across the table. The latest financial projections. We have about 2 weeks of operating capital left, and that's only if we proceed with the next round of layoffs today. Richard scanned the numbers, though they merely confirmed what he already knew. Brightwell was finished. The bankruptcy proceedings were moving forward, but there would be nothing left to reorganize, just assets to liquidate and debts to settle. Has legal made any progress with Cole's team? Any settlement discussions? He asked without much hope. James shook his head. They won't even take our calls. Their position is that there's nothing to discuss. The partnership was never finalized, so there's no breach of contract. Everything else, he gestured vaguely. Everything else is just business. Just business. The phrase hung in the air, its implications clear. Xavier Cole hadn't needed to declare a vendetta or issue threats. He had simply allowed market forces to do his work for him, strategically accelerating Brightwell's downfall through perfectly legal business maneuvers. The remaining employees are asking questions, Christina said, breaking the heavy silence. They know about the layoffs coming. Morale is non-existent. Tell them the truth, Richard replied, surprising both executives. They deserve that much. At least. Tell them to update their resumes and start looking. There won't be a Brightwell by the end of the month. As the meeting concluded, Richard remained behind, staring at the Brightwell logo on the wall. 20 years of his life. Gone, in less than a month. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Movers confirmed for Saturday. The Colorado house is ready. At least he had somewhere to go. His vacation home, purchased in happier times, would become his permanent residence now. Many Brightwell employees wouldn't be so fortunate. Across town at the Cole Innovations campus, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The sleek modern building hummed with productive energy as employees moved purposefully through open workspaces designed to foster collaboration and innovation. In a glass-walled conference room, Xavier Cole hosted the final integration meeting between Cole Innovations and DataSphere teams. The merger had proceeded at unprecedented speed, with both companies' technologies already showing promising results in early integration testing. Your neural network security protocols mesh perfectly with our quantum encryption framework, Daniel Chen, former CEO of DataSphere and now Chief Innovation Officer at Cole Innovations, was saying. The combined system is showing a 98% success rate against even the most sophisticated penetration testing. Xavier nodded, pleased, but not surprised. The compatibility of their technologies had been a key factor in his decision to pivot from Brightwell to DataSphere, a decision he'd been considering even before the lobby incident. Vanessa's team deserves much of the credit, Xavier replied, nodding toward Vanessa Lewis, who sat confidently at the table. Their improvements to the adaptive response algorithms have eliminated the false positive issues we were seeing in early trials. Vanessa accepted the acknowledgement with a professional smile. Her transition to Cole Innovations had been remarkably smooth, her talents immediately recognized and rewarded. Where Brightwell had buried her innovations under layers of management and corporate politics, Xavier had given her direct access to resources and decision-making authority. As the meeting concluded, Xavier asked Vanessa to stay behind. Once they were alone, he handed her a tablet displaying architectural renderings. The Cole Center for Innovation, Vanessa read, examining the detailed plans. This is the Brightwell building? It will be, Xavier confirmed. Our acquisition. Offer was accepted yesterday. Once the bankruptcy proceedings conclude, we'll take ownership and begin renovations. Vanessa studied the plans more carefully. This doesn't look like office space. It won't be, at least not entirely. The lower floors will house a technology education center focused on underserved communities. The upper levels will be incubator, space for minority entrepreneurs developing innovations in cybersecurity and AI. You're turning Brightwell into an innovation hub for Black tech founders, Vanessa said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Xavier's expression remained composed, but there was a quiet intensity in his voice. What happened at Brightwell was never just about one receptionist or one executive. It was about a culture that enables such behavior throughout the tech industry. The Cole Center will be part of changing that culture. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. I'd like you to oversee the education programs at the center. Your technical expertise combined with your passion for mentorship makes you the ideal candidate. Vanessa was momentarily speechless. The opportunity was beyond anything she had imagined, a chance to not just advance her own career, but to help create pathways for others like her. I would be honored, she finally said, genuine emotion coloring her voice. Xavier nodded, satisfied. Good. We begin planning next week. In a modest apartment across town, Ashley Monroe sat surrounded by moving boxes, her once pristine space, now a chaotic reflection of her unraveling life. Her phone, a new number after the harassment became unbearable, rang with her mother's ringtone. Yes, Mom, she answered tiredly. Ashley, did you see the news? They're saying Brightwell is officially bankrupt. What does this mean for your lawsuit? Ashley closed her eyes, fighting back the now familiar wave of despair. It doesn't change anything. Xavier Cole's lawsuit against me is personal, not against the company. The personal lawsuit had become her waking nightmare. Her savings were depleted from legal retainers, her credit cards maxed out, and now her apartment lease was ending with no prospect of finding a new place, not with her name and face still circulating online as the racist receptionist. Well, what does your lawyer say? Her mother pressed. That I should settle, Ashley replied dully. That fighting this will cost more than I could ever afford to pay, and I'd still lose in the end. The reality of her situation had become impossible to ignore. Her former co-workers wouldn't speak to her. Job applications went unanswered. Even dating apps had banned her account after users reported her profile. The full weight of public condemnation had transformed her life into an unrecognizable nightmare. I have to go, Mom. The moving truck is coming soon. After ending the call, Ashley checked her email one last time, a self-destructive habit she couldn't seem to break. Among the hate mail and spam was a message from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, Employment Opportunity. Desperate. For any glimmer of hope, she opened it. The message was brief. Ms. Monroe, a position has become available at Green Valley Customer Service Center. Given your experience in client relations, you might be suitable for this role. Starting salary is $14.50 the hour, night shift only. Background check required. If interested, please reply with your availability for an interview. Ashley stared at the message, torn between relief and humiliation. From a prestigious reception position at a leading tech company to a night shift, call center job at barely above minimum wage. The fall couldn't be more stark. With trembling fingers, she composed her reply, accepting the interview. Across town, Mark Reynolds faced his own version of professional purgatory. The once powerful executive sat in a sterile government building, waiting to be called for yet another deposition in the SEC's expanding investigation into his communications with Nexus Tech. His phone buzzed with a message from his attorney. Don't say anything without me present. New evidence has emerged. Mark's stomach clenched. New evidence could only mean one thing. More of his communications had been discovered. He'd been so careful, using personal devices and encrypted channels, but somehow Xavier Cole's team had found everything. A stone-faced federal agent appeared at the door. Mr. Reynolds, we're ready for you now. 6 hours later, Mark emerged from the building, haggard and defeated. The new evidence had been devastating, emails showing he had shared proprietary Brightwell technology with Nexus Tech in exchange for promises of a lucrative position after the Cole deal fell through. His attorney waited by the car, expression grim. "They're filing charges, Mark. Securities fraud, corporate espionage, wire fraud. We need to discuss plea options." Mark barely registered the words. His mind was fixed on Xavier Cole, the man who had said nothing during their brief encounter in the Brightwell lobby, but had somehow orchestrated the complete destruction of everything Mark had built. "How did he do it?" Mark whispered. "How did he find everything so quickly?" His attorney shook his head. "Cole's cybersecurity team is the best in the world, Mark. Finding your encrypted emails was probably child's play for them." That night, as Mark sat alone in his empty house, his wife having left when the scandal broke, his phone chimed with a news alert. Cole Innovations acquires Brightwell Building, announces Technology Center for Minority Entrepreneurs. The accompanying photo showed Xavier Cole standing confidently before the former Brightwell headquarters, the company's logo already removed from the facade. Beside him stood Vanessa Lewis, identified as the new Director of Educational Initiatives for the Cole Center for Innovation. Mark hurled his phone across the room, where it shattered against the wall, a fitting metaphor for his life and career. 1 year later, the gleaming building that had once housed Brightwell Enterprises was unrecognizable. The stark corporate facade had been transformed with warm wood accents and expansive glass. The lobby now an inviting space, filled with interactive technology displays and comfortable seating areas. Where Ashley Monroe had once sat guarding access to corporate power, young students from diverse backgrounds now gathered around workstations, absorbed in coding exercises and collaborative projects. The security guards who had manhandled Xavier had been replaced by community mentors who guided visitors with genuine warmth. The Cole Center for Innovation had become exactly what Xavier had envisioned, a pipeline for underrepresented talent to enter the tech industry, supported by resources typically reserved for privileged insiders. On this particular morning, Xavier walked through the bustling space accompanied by Vanessa Lewis, whose leadership had been instrumental in the center's success. "The first cohort of security specialists is graduating next week," Vanessa reported as they toured the facility. "All 25 students have job offers, 8 of them from Cole Innovations." Xavier nodded, watching a young black woman confidently leading a peer coding review. "And the incubator companies? Tech Dreams and Neural Shield have secured second-round funding. SafeSpace just signed their first major client." Vanessa couldn't keep the pride from her voice. "They're redefining what's possible in the cybersecurity space, especially with your mentorship." As they reached the upper floors that housed the incubator spaces, Xavier paused to observe the transformation. The executive offices that had once been Mark Reynolds' domain now buzzed with the energy of startup founders building new technologies and futures. "I received another email from Richard Lawson yesterday," Xavier mentioned as they continued their tour. "He's still looking for consulting work." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell him?" "The same thing I've told him every month for the past year. His expertise doesn't align with our current initiatives." The subtle response was quintessential Xavier. No explicit rejection, no gloating, simply a business decision consistently applied. Richard Lawson had lost everything in Brightwell's collapse. His reputation in tatters, he had retreated to Colorado, occasionally reaching out to former contacts for consulting opportunities that rarely materialized. "And Ashley Monroe?" Vanessa asked, curious despite herself. "Still at the call center, in Green Valley," Xavier replied. "The lawsuit was settled 6 months ago. A public apology and community service requirement rather than financial penalties. The settlement had been carefully calibrated, not to destroy Ashley completely, but to ensure consequences proportional to her actions." The former receptionist now worked night shifts handling customer service calls, frequently facing the same dismissive treatment she had once dispensed so casually. "You know, she applied for our administrative support program last month," Vanessa mentioned. Xavier showed no surprise. "Yes. Her application was considered like any other and found wanting. Again, no vindictiveness, just the natural consequences of actions and choices playing out over time." As they reached the center's community space, they found a group of teenage girls engaged in an animated discussion of neural network architecture. Seeing Xavier, they fell silent momentarily before one brave young woman approached. "Mr. Cole, can I ask you something?" she said, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "Everyone talks about how you built Cole Innovations from nothing, but what was the hardest part? What was the biggest obstacle?" Xavier considered the question thoughtfully. The assembled students waited, notebooks and tablets ready to record whatever wisdom he might share. "The biggest obstacle," he said finally, "wasn't technological or financial. It was the persistent underestimation I faced, people who couldn't see past their preconceptions to recognize capability." He glanced around the room, making eye contact with each student. "But underestimation can become your greatest advantage. When people don't see you coming, they don't prepare for your arrival. Remember that." The students nodded, absorbing his words with serious expressions. For them, Xavier Cole represented something beyond wealth or technical brilliance. He symbolized the possibility of success in an industry that had historically excluded people who looked like them. Later that afternoon, Xavier stood on the rooftop, terrace of the Cole Center, gazing out at the city skyline. A year had passed since the confrontation in Brightwell's lobby, and the landscape, both literal and figurative, had changed dramatically. Brightwell Enterprises no longer existed. Its assets had been sold off, its technologies absorbed by competitors, its name fading rapidly from industry memory. The executives who had enabled its toxic culture had scattered, some finding positions at lesser firms, others leaving the tech sector entirely. Mark Reynolds had faced the harshest fate. After pleading guilty to reduced charges of wire fraud and misappropriation of trade secrets, he had served 6 months in a minimum security facility. Upon release, he had found himself unhireable, his reputation permanently tarnished. Last Xavier had heard, Reynolds had moved to Arizona, attempting to reinvent himself in real estate, with limited success. Vanessa joined Xavier on the terrace, handing him a tablet displaying the latest performance metrics for the center's programs. "The board was impressed with the quarterly results," she said. "They've approved the expansion to Atlanta and Chicago." Xavier nodded, pleased but not surprised. The Cole Center had proven so successful that replicating it in other tech hubs had become the obvious next step. What had begun as a response to a personal slight had evolved into something much more significant, a systemic approach to changing the tech industry's composition and culture. "I've been thinking about what happens next," Xavier said, handing the tablet back to Vanessa. "Beyond the expansion. What did you have in mind?" "Federal policy," Xavier replied. "The tech sector's diversity problems won't be solved by private initiatives alone. We need regulatory frameworks that create accountability." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly. "That's a much bigger battlefield." "Indeed, one where the opposition will be more systemic, more entrenched." Xavier's expression remained calm, but his eyes held the same calculated focus that had guided Brightwell's dismantling. "I've been invited to speak at the National Technology Policy Forum next month. The Secretary of Commerce will be present." Understanding dawned on Vanessa's face. Xavier wasn't just building centers or funding programs. He was positioning himself to influence industry-wide policy changes. "The center will need strong leadership if I'm going to be spending more time in Washington," Xavier continued, turning to face her directly. "I'd like you to take on the role of executive director, overseeing all locations." For the second time in their relationship, Vanessa found herself momentarily speechless. The promotion would place her among the most influential Black women in the tech sector, with resources and authority to drive meaningful change. "I would be honored," she said finally, echoing her response from a year earlier but with even greater conviction. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the city, Xavier's phone chimed with a message. It was from his chief of staff, confirming his attendance at the upcoming technology gala, where he would receive the Innovation Impact Award, the industry's highest honor for contributions to both technology and social good. The irony wasn't lost on him. A year ago, he had been physically removed from a tech company's lobby, dismissed and disrespected based solely on his appearance. Now he was being celebrated by that same industry, his influence extending far beyond his company's technological achievements. His phone chimed again with a text from Vanessa, who had stepped away to take a call. The Cole Center is officially open in Atlanta. Your legacy is just beginning. Xavier allowed himself a small smile as he gazed out at the city. The confrontation at Brightwell had never been about revenge. It had been about consequences, about establishing that respect wasn't optional in business or in life. What had emerged from that moment wasn't just the fall of one company, but the rise of something far more important, a new pathway for talent that had too long been sidelined. As he turned to leave the terrace, Xavier took one last look at the building that had once represented everything wrong with the tech industry's culture. Now transformed into the Cole Center for Innovation, it stood as a physical reminder that power, when wielded with precision and purpose, could create lasting change. He had won, not just by dismantling what was broken, but by building something better in its place. What would you do if your success became someone else's downfall? How far would you go to transform humiliation into lasting change? If Xavier Cole's journey from disrespect to revolution moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of power, consequence, and transformation. New stories every day, where the underestimated always have the final word.